one of the things that was mentioned earlier was somebody said that they were struggling for power for infrastructure. I forget who it was. It may have been Chris actually. It was Chris, in fact, on his MOD site. So we have started looking into the possibilities of working with ICPs and IDNOs. So an independent connection provider and an independent DNO. Obviously, the guys over at Enged do some of that, like the contestables bit and the non-contestables and whatnots as well. But it's in partnership with those. Obviously, we have a working relationship with National Grid ourselves. We also work with UKPN back towards ourselves over in Bedfordshire. But what that means, and it does work, and I have seen it work, and we've got projects in place where we are operating it, is that what we've been able to provide is new substation connections for not just EV charging, but certainly where businesses are looking to improve their energy efficiency. So if I could give you a very small case study, there's a chain of hotels that are based out from near us, and they are spending a fortune on not just gas for their kitchens, but also on like the cleaning their extractor fans and the like from the gas and all the rest of it and whatnot. So they want to change to induction heating cooking, but they don't have the power to do it. So what we did was, as part of that conversation, they were talking about whether they could put EV charging in for the hotels. So we said, that's fine, you can do both. So what we've done is we've provided a new substation connection on their premises to power the new kitchen and their EV charging, and they actually got paid to do that. It didn't cost them anything. Now, I said this in Wales, and everybody kind of, you can't be right. It does work. It's because when, as an IDNO, what they'll do is they'll have an asset valuation. They value that substation at a certain amount of money and pay the customer, not us, the customer, for that substation. We as a business, for our customers who are in a support arrangement with us, we carry the parts for the units that they own on our vans. So if we have engineers out on the road, they always have what we call a charger in a box on the back of their van, whereby if they turn up to a unit that's at fault, they have the part that's needed to fix the unit.
We've actually got an array, solar array installed on the site, on the roofs, all around on all the buildings and in the fields. So we have a 3.3 megawatt solar array, which 95% at the moment is going to the grid. But the intention is to convert all the current vehicles. We've got 18 diesel vehicles over to electric over whatever period. There are a lot of the vehicles out there who are producing electric vehicles, but not for the mileage that we require. So
high mileage.
it is the higher mileage, not a high mileage, but we're looking around about 350 miles usable on heavy goods. This is for day-night trunking. But the vehicle we looked at initially was a 7.5 tonne and then a 14 tonne.
Just a query that's come up a couple of months ago at our university.
Yep.
I was informed from our health and safety team that they've recently done a risk assessment on the charges we've got on our campus, and from advice from our insurers, Zurich, they've now told us that we should have all our electric or our EV chargers at least 20 metres away from a building, which we can't do at the moment because they're all attached to buildings.
Yeah.
It's got to be, and they've said the various reasons around that. So I'm now looking to perhaps, hopefully, have a separate part of the campus, right at the top of the campus, which would probably need its own substation, I'm guessing, where we could have all our EV chargers in one place.
Yep.
And I was just alluded to what you said really earlier, Wayne. You said you could probably get that at a low cost.
If not, a negative cost to you. Yeah. So I suppose that's something that's really worth mentioning, particularly is in rural areas where you have potentially a significantly larger land space than a city centre company or a city centre organisation. If you have large car parks, or even if it's rough ground. So essentially, it's, what we're talking about, what you could potentially be talking about there, is what I refer to as greenfield charging, which is essentially it's nothing there to start with.
Yeah.
And then we build you a car park, put a substation in it, a small car park. I'm not talking about a multi-storey, but then it's able to house your charging hub for your fleets. So it's, rather than trying to find parking spaces that you can sort of nick for EV charging that are close enough to the building for the power supplies and all the rest of it, you're not defined by that challenge, you can, like you say, you can look at areas where maybe they were just set down areas for plant or something like that, and you can bring power connections in for new subs. Obviously, then that power doesn't have to just be used for EV charging either. You can use it for other things, but equally, as was mentioned earlier about that sort of solar array that you mentioned right at the very first thing. If you've got renewables on site, if you've got potential for battery storage, which if you've got as much as you have, but equally in a business scenario, in a scenario where you're relying on your chargers, making sure that you know what your chargers are doing, or at least somebody who understands what the information is coming out of these units means that your chargers are up around that uptime. It's that availability piece, but again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have somebody who's responsible for running around and checking all your lights are green every morning. You know,
Or maybe you do.
We do.
That was the lunchtime conversation.
That's our conversation.
do you really?
We
Yeah.
have a problem at the moment, and I haven't got access to the system. Well, we pop it all on charge at night. They're the little ones. Check the green lights as you walk past in the car park and everything. You come in and half of them they've been suspended, so they're not always charged in the morning.
Okay.
At the moment, we have 400 charging bays. By then next summer, we would hope that the plan is going forward that you would not be more than 10 miles away from a charger for our employees throughout the business. That's the Midlands, South Wales and the South West.
In terms of our challenges, we've got kind of uptime on charge points. That's been a surprise we weren't necessarily expecting.
In amongst all of that, making sure that your CPMS is resilient, right? Making sure that your chargers set up correctly, commissioned correctly, but also what we started to do last year was we realised that we needed to provide some business continuity for one of our customers, National Grid, as it goes. We needed to provide business continuity for them, in that we now have 1,700 charging bays in the ground for National Grid now across their substation and corporate network. The NGED chargers, we provided the chargers for them, but they're being installed by another party. So but we realised that if the CPMS had a problem, so the back office had a problem, server went down for whatever reason, we had no access to 1,700 assets, which was unacceptable to National Grid. As you can imagine, they've got 60% of their fleet are going to be electric by the end of this year. So there's a lot of vans running around that are relying on these chargers. So essentially what we did was we investigated, procured, and then rolled out our own SIM card provision. And the reason I say that's important, and it comes back to the manufacturer that you've gone with, as in the type of charge point, because they don't all do it. But from my laptop on charge over there, I can get into any one of those chargers directly through the SIM to the landing page, which gives me diagnostics, gives me control, and it means that if there was a problem with the back office, we can divert it to a different one.
Okay.
So, but what it also means is that SIM card, again, it's a National Grid rule, but you have to, they deemed it a IT security risk to hook it up to their networks. Obviously, it looks after the network, so we couldn't tie into that. So all of our chargers are individually SIM carded, which means that it doesn't interfere with your parking system,
Right.
and they're individually run.
We also have struggled with and is getting better is in regards to how we then pay for that charging. So not there's a lot of different suppliers for the sockets. When you're going to go there, you're going to charge wherever it is, and it's whether our card's going to be able to be accepted. They don't all carry around a MasterCard or a debit card. They have their fuel card, and that is that. So for quite a while we had a bit of a struggle in regards to if they were going to a charger, could they actually use that card? Then we don't necessarily issue phones to an individual depending on who they are. They could look it up then. They're looking on their personal phone, and that necessarily wouldn't always work. So it's even just to kind of around the logistics of getting someone there as well.
And I say, is this the phone to find the charger?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if they're going down, wherever, and they've got to look for the suitable charger that is available and could work for that car,
Yeah.
they might not. ZapMap is majority of the way that people say, "Oh, look it up. Put your car in, look it up."
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But if they don't have a phone, they can't look it up.
Yeah.
So it's then that kind of and
I mean, the car does a lot of it.
Yes.
these days. if
But it's
you're
just a
buying
bit
new
more
car.
tricky, and it's not necessarily that everybody has got that level of kind of tech.
The biggest issue we have as part of the courier service is the physical charging of the 5 vehicles on site. Because as a service, we have to charge them on site, we're also using the public chargers, which then we have to make sure are available for the public. So it's the general politics of getting them charged rather than being able to just to pop them on charge, leave them, and them to go.
On the infra side of it, which is our biggest headache right now, because our sites are very old, very decrepit. Plug 2 toasters in at the same time, you're likely to blow a fuse. Think about putting 15,500 vehicles across 400 sites. It's a challenge. I have one site that I'm not allowed to mention where it is, but to put the infrastructure required to protect us against the next 5 years worth of demand for electric vehicles and other pieces of kit is £8 million for one site. And that is not an unusual one. We have several that are looking at that kind of, so funding infra. There's lots of conversations we had this morning about sort of PV and about off-grid charging and things that I would say if you're interested in talking about that, kind of come and find me, because there's lots of things I can probably do where we are trialing various bits of off-grid kit. And actually a lot of the technology that's out there is really very good.
We've heard a lot this morning around the table in the discussion about driver training, behaviours and attitudes to the adoption of EVs in the fleet, what tracking your vehicle fleet may tell you that kind of dispels the myths that all vehicles are travelling 300 miles every day to the 4 corners of the country, and so on. So, Sean, kind of tell us a little bit more about Quartix. Why, the general benefits of telematics, but how that works very well when you are thinking about decarbonising your fleet.
Okay, so hello everybody. There's a few faces around this table I know, a few I don't, and a few companies I think we may well have worked with in the past that we'd love to talk to again. I'm Sean Marr, I'm Sales Director for Quartix. I've been with the company for 16 years and been selling tracking since 2003, so when it kind of first became the thing. So I've seen a massive change in why people take vehicle tracking. I think in the old days it was Big Brother, who, when, what, who was there, when were they there, and why were they there. Drivers I used to have friends that would pay me not to go and see their bosses so that I wouldn't track them at weekends. But I think on a serious note, the reason for people taking telematics now, it's changed dramatically. I'd say in the last five or 6 years. As I say, gone are the days where it's just, well, I just want to know where they are and are they where they're meant to be at the right time. Excuse me. There is more and more when we sit in front of fleet managers, and I know, Robert, we've had these conversations. It's kind of been, I've got a transition, but I don't really know how, and I don't really know how I'm going to tell my workforce that it's doable. So the advantage that we bring to the table is, I suppose, we bring fact, we bring truth, and we worked out that if we take it as an overview of not knowing which vehicles we were looking at and where they were from, we worked out that the average vehicle that we were tracking across the public sector, the average vehicle does 47 miles a day. And most people go, oh no, I do thousands of miles a week. There's no way I can move to EV.
Mind you, about 10.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, so you definitely booked the trend. But the point is, we're able to say, look, actually, the vehicles that you've got, this is actually what they do. This is where they go. And importantly, by overlaying the infrastructure mapping, we can tell you where those vehicles have got the ability to be charged, whether that be through the day, whether that be after hours. Because typically we know 24 hours a day on a second by second basis where your vehicles are.
I must have missed the conversation previously, but are your systems hardwired or they just plug in OBD?
No, we're hardwired.
Right, okay.
You have an option. We do OBD, we do connect and track, but you would be going down the hardwired.
Yeah, definitely.
I know Lisa actually asked us if there was an opportunity for short-term rentals. So we do have an option of plug and play. But look, typically, I think if you're wanting to do this and you want to do it properly, you want to hardwire a unit into a building. So you don't want people to be able to unplug it and move stuff around and say, well, actually, I didn't do that journey. Yeah, you've got to.
Lisa come to me the other day and she goes, Mike, what do you want? I said, hardwire, definitely, because as soon as someone unplugs it, It goes in for diagnostics, whatever. It don't get put back in, does
Yeah,
it?
no, absolutely. I mean, as I say, I've sold these for a long, long time, and people will sit in front of me and say, do you think is the best way? If you hardwire something in as well, you've got the advantage that it's completely covertly installed. So if somebody was to steal the vehicle, you've got more chance of getting it back. You put it in through the OBD port, number of issues. You take it into service, the manufacturer will not plug it back in, and they'll just throw it on the floor. The driver will go, oh, does that plug in?
Spit on it.
That's it. Kick on it, stamp on it. The driver will go, oh, is that all I've got to do to stop it tracking?
Yeah.
So we can tell you you've unplugged it, but once it's unplugged, it's no good.
Speed bumps.
Yeah, that's it just fell off on my knee. I mean, we do a connection track that sits on the bonnet, under the bonnet out of the way, which is a little bit better, has a backup battery in that. But yeah, from our point of view, yeah, with us, we'll be supplying an engineer that will install it for you, hardwire it, and it'll all be in there and allow you to do driver ID, etc. as well. That's us really.
Can I ask you a modelling question then? So we have historically used our telematics for exactly what you just said. So it was always veiled as safety, because obviously it's a big piece, and it generally is, because we know the biggest risk to any of these things is the person that's sat in the driver's seat.
Yep.
We're also trying to get smarter about it, and I'm trying to educate them into your piece of software, because I've had the fortunate enough to learn a bit more about yours recently. Is it also able to offer, because we have a similar kind of platform really about where we're being told to charge our vehicles
within-
almost all, exclusively on our own sites. We don't have enough charge points, so that doesn't stand in my world. But does it also have the ability to be able to sort of forecast the modelling and say, okay, well, if this is the map, what and where would you be able to put something in there? So this heat map doesn't look like it quite works, or it's a 30%. Would it also have the modelling ability to be able to go, well, actually, in the future plan, would it be able to, if you put a 50 into there instead of a 7, or 150, or we're now talking 350 pluses, would it be able to help model that
and
future planning element?
And interestingly, when we first did the first test on this, we wanted to make sure that we did something that proved that we could do it, and it wasn't just a pure piece of luck. So the company that we trialled this on, they operated in Scotland and they operated on the islands. We thought we could have made it very easy and made ourselves look very, very good and say there's 100% ability to transition, and we could have gone and done that in Birmingham or London. But we worked with a company, a pretty large company with 400 vehicle fleet, based primarily in Scotland, and they were our test case. And we actually showed that based on where they were, including, as I say, the Outer Hebrides and goodness knows where else they were, we were able to show that we were able to transition around 60% of their fleet. Whereas if I'd have gone and found a big company in Birmingham, I could have probably gone back and said, well, it's 100%. And I think then it would have looked very almost gerrymandered that our system would be wonderful and would be able to tell you everything. But we were able to say, well, look, these are the areas where you're going to need charging points based on the time that these vehicles are parked up. These are the levels of charge you're going to need. Is it going to need a 50 kilowatt? Is it going to need a 7 kilowatt? Etc. etc. So in essence, that ability within our system is there to do that for you. Yeah.
Funding recovered maintenance was a really interesting one. I had picked up a couple of times. So the 4 to 400 is a stat I always like to say whenever I'm doing presentations or conversations. 4 to 400 is a massive sort of soundbite. So yeah, the average EV is around about 4 moving parts. Average diesel is about 400. It gives you all sorts of benefits in the maintenance space. But think bigger picture than just simply about maintaining them on site. Think about the support network that you require in order to get your vehicles in service. So uptime we were talking about. In fact, those that didn't mention it probably already think about the uptimes of our vehicles, availability as we call it, availability of assets. Actually, it's the support networks that often get forgotten about these things. But actually, we need less support services. We need less trucks bringing parts to places where we need to go. And you can imagine that's White Fleet and Green. But White Fleet, we need less components. There's less parts that wear out. Actually, when you think about the fact that the average sort of brake disc, for example, on a standard diesel car is going to expire considerably quicker, and therefore the brake dust that's created, and all the other conversations that are going on in peripherals right now as well. But actually, most EVs, certainly the ones I've driven so far, will do 100,000 miles without needing a brake disc change because they don't use brakes. Because the regen capacity of most of the modern cars actually eliminates that. So again, it's thinking about not needing to have a massive warehouse full of spare bits because they're complicated beasts, whereas actually then you want a more simple from a maintenance and keeping it available, period.
There's about 18 HGVs ranging from 7.5 up to 18 ton. We have 2 electric vehicles currently, which we've had for the past 5 years. Obviously, with government guidelines, we've got to work being green by 2027, I think it is. Biggest problem we've got is the infrastructure and the cost of the vehicles. But yeah, so that's us.
Okay. The clock's ticking, isn't it? 2027, and I mean, genuinely, we're going to be in 2025 soon.
Yeah.
So, and is that, when you say green by 2027, is that your entire existing fleet has to be green or new purchases?
New purchases, hires, lease.
Right.
Speaking to a few of the counterparts around the country in the same boat as us, they're looking at going backwards, I suppose, essentially, of buying a whole new fleet of diesels in 2026. It gives them a bit more of a timeline then to be able to get the infrastructure in and the funding for the vehicles. It's definitely not cheap to buy an 18-ton HGV with the range that we need. We cover from Devizes down to Cornwall sort of thing, and really quick turnaround in some cases.
Well, the sweeper demo, the little compact sweeper we got on demo at the minute, for a diesel one is something like 70 odd grand. The electric one's 185 grand.
Right. Okay.
And for councils that are struggling financially, that's a hell of a difference, isn't it?
Yeah, what I don't know is what its running costs are, so I can't, upfront cost, no question, is a problem.
It has been working out well though, the actual battery life it did a full day's work and it still came back at 65% charge on it. It's picked up the same amount as what was going with the other sweepers used at the same time.
It's got to outweigh the initial purchase price. We buy a Mercedes vehicle at the moment, just a rolling chassis sort of thing, that costs 87 grand. To buy an electric version is 250.
Yeah.
That's a good few years. You're going to have to pull that back in. So we're going to end up keeping that vehicle.
More than a few years.
Yeah. So that's a big, and that's a 7-year lease. So £86,000 and 86k was interest.
Yeah.
So even if you purchase it, it's 86 grand off of 250. It's still a lot of variance from the cost of diesel to how long it's going to take you to pull that back in electricity.
Yeah.
Restrictions on how we go about procuring our fleet are challenging. Everybody's budgets are being squashed in every direction, and actually some of the challenges I know we're talking about sort of upfront costs versus ongoing. We have a bit of a problem without giving too much away that we have annualised budgets, and I'm sure, same.
Yep.
And it gives us an additional challenge. So the vast majority of our vehicles are leased in order to try and help us procure what we need and when we need it. That's why I say about 90 miles or less, and you've obviously created a stat that's quite similar.
Yeah.
So we use a lot of that stuff to change win hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Which is the behaviours and attitudes piece, isn't it?
And this is, we've heard it today that this is such an important part of it. Whether that is you've got an electric Corsa on your fleet, but it's the same kind of. You've got the people who are EV champions, for want of a better word, who are totally on board with it and get it and enjoy the challenge and want to make it work. And you've got another group of people who are, fearful of the change, possibly never driven an automatic vehicle, read the Daily Mail too much and believe that they're going to run out of charge every 5 minutes.
I will say we had a very negative with a lot of our drivers, all of those. And the ones that have now used it are now the ones that are championing it. They have completely changed their view to it.
Same response.
Yeah.
And as you go back to the change of attitude, I'm going off piece a little bit, but 10 years ago the big thing was driving behaviour. When suddenly tracking companies could tell you how well people drove, it was quite interesting when you put out into their businesses and show where their average score was around their risk. And typically risk was pretty high in most businesses because nobody had ever tracked it before. And when you actually demonstrate to people that their risk is here, it's amazing how that attitude changes and you see that risk get lower and lower and lower. I mean, typically now most of the companies that actually do use our data properly will have very, very low risk profiles because they bring that into play, which again has a benefit to the mileage and the fuel, etc. But you're right to say, absolutely, indeed. But the point is, as you say, if you can change those attitudes, because the weakest link of anything you'll ever do in our industry will always be the person that's driving the vehicle. You can train them till you're blue in the face and tell them this will do that and this will do that, but in theory, you give somebody the keys to a vehicle, they're now driving something, probably one of your most expensive assets, and you have no visibility of them apart from if you're looking at them on the tracking system. So it comes to the point that if you can change that behaviour, and again that goes back to the anxiety range. I mean, I was the first person to take an electric vehicle in Quartix. Now everybody's getting new vehicles. Now I've done it; they're all getting electric. So I was kind of the guinea pig, and it's just like I was the one that typically did the highest mileage out of the sales guys, and I've had no issue with it. I the anxiety, all that kind of stuff doesn't exist anymore.
So what we have done is we've put training videos together, which our customers then have to circulate to their staff. We put in a process which is basically a collaboration agreement between us and our customers, which we call first response, which essentially means that we train their staff to carry out very basic functions that don't expose them to any additional hazards. They don't have to take covers off and expose live parts and stuff, but they're able to power cycle charges. They're able to carry out certain tests with the assistance of the help desk on the phone, which means that charger is, if we haven't been able to fix it remotely, which is about a 97% case, then they're able to fix that unit and bring it back online without needing to wait for us to come to site, or the typical experience of an engineer comes to site and sucks air through his teeth and says, oh yeah, I'll be back in 3 weeks with the part you need. So providing that kind of customer empowerment is really important to us.
I think also that's an education piece is also we haven't got to do it for a small amount of people. We could, one of those courses, for instance, that's on a pool car booking system, so they can, anybody in the service can book that. So you're not just training 50 people. You've got anybody could book that car.
Let's come back to the staff side again if we can, because I think there's so much there. But quick question: do you not find that it's the same group of people who are happy to book the electric pool cars?
We are finding there are particular people that will book them and feel comfortable to do so. We are trying to encourage people to book them. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There are a select people, but then when a car that is a nice car isn't available, they're going to have to go in an electric, and then what do? We kind of don't want people at that point where they're having to book that, and it's that kind of panic that comes with that. We want to make sure that everybody's kind of educated and can just get in the car and feel comfortable with that, and not have any of that range anxiety and all of that sort of stuff. So.
It's a good course. I've actually done that course as well.
Yeah, so did I. It's good. Yeah.
And how long's the course?
2 days.
Oh, we done 3.
2 days, and it was half a day in the classroom before.
Yeah,
that's it. No, bit of practical. Yeah, it was good.
But you take out inverters, you take out the battery pack in the workshop.
All the service blocks.
Yeah, so it's worth doing. Yeah. I don't think
Pretty good course.
not mega money, £600-700 or whatever it was, £800.
Yeah, it was around that. Yeah. All our guys. I look after 6 workshops in the southwest, and all 20 of us have, we're all MI certificated.
Yeah.
There's a 2-person operation isn't it, every time you take the battery out. Is that right?
Yeah, it should be to a degree. Yeah, mainly due to the weight. But it's how you remove the battery is what they train you on. It's that one hand on the hip. As you remember, isn't it? It's one hand away, and it's all a procedure. Yeah, but really informative, really good.
Well, one hand on the hip, presumably, so you're not completing a circuit.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Okay.
So and I think the other side of it from a purchasing perspective is now we're starting to see, we tried leasing some drop sites, and we're starting to see that some of those are now going completely over to either hybrid or electric, so we can't even now get some of the diesel vehicles that we need to kind of keep the operational side going. In the end, there ended up being one that we could get out of the whole market.
So, sorry, say that again.
So there's a drop side, so we needed a 3.5 tonne drop side. And it needed to be diesel for the operational side of it. At the moment, we couldn't go over to fully electric. But at the moment, what's starting to happen is, because the manufacturers are all going over to electric, and that's the way it's all going, they're starting to drop off and discontinue some of the models and all of that sort of stuff. So now we're starting to find that we are limiting kind of competition, because I can only get one. It's only one that's going to fit what that requirement is. So now I've had to lease that one. So from a procurement perspective, doesn't sit very well with me, but It's what we needed and that's what we had to do. So it's starting to reduce that market for diesel and petrol as well.
And it's now being reflected on other vehicles.
Yes.
So coaches, buses.
So we don't
Some
have
of our
coaches or buses.
Some of our companies have just told us that over 70% of their market is demanding EVs, and therefore actually being able to get hold of fossil fuel versions of buses and coaches in the next few years is going to be not impossible or very expensive.
Yeah, Chris Kaniak, Transport Manager for National Grid South West. I cover literally from Taunton down to Redruth. Probably you're looking at us as people that should be leading the way, which I believe we are. Again, for you guys, we have the same problem. Vehicles fit for application. The trucks, there's nothing out there. Four-wheel drive wise, there's nothing out there. Payload's a massive factor. We've tried all sorts. We've got some transits on fleet at the moment on trial, but the payload is so low we can't physically work with it. Currently got a little over 300 vehicles, EV vehicles, small vans at the moment. Looking to increase that to around 1,000.
I mean, we've removed all of our 3.5 tons now.
Yeah.
Because it was just too much of a risk going overweight. I mean, when you've got an empty cage which weighs between 47 and 50
Yeah.
kilos, take into account the boxes of medical records. If we had to go electric without the extra weight and only allowing you a little margin, it just wouldn't have been viable. We'd
Yeah.
be doubling up on the runs. The cost
It's getting a vehicle that would have the tail lift.
I'm not a van driver, right? But I mean, I do know that the range on vans is much more of a challenge, particularly with the payload.
Yeah, and that's before we look at our sweepers, our 7.5 tonners with bin lifts, tail lifts. You know, it's not there yet, is it? That's the problem.
This is a really interesting, I mean, I call it this trilemma, this TCO trilemma, which is range, payload and cost, you know, and balancing those off. But, you know, if the manufacturers are being told, we need more range, we need more range, we need more range, the answer to that is to put a bigger battery in. You put a bigger battery in, you're going to pay a lot more for the vehicle.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you have a battery with a bigger, ever have a vehicle with a bigger battery, but it's never going below 50%, probably overspec'd your battery, you know, and unnecessarily pushed your costs up. That's the...
Yeah.
It's the weight gain as well, I think.
Yeah.
A transit that we had to increase the range became an O-licensed vehicle because it became over 3.5 tonne.
Yeah.
Because of the extra weight. You got the range, but
Yeah.
it was a whole different
Did-
ballgame.
did
Is that what they
Was it-
changed the weight limit to? Didn't it?
Yeah.
Which they need to do that on all EVs, especially the heavy goods. 44 tonnes needs to be 48.
We are struggling kind of similarly to you guys in regards to sweating the asset. Our older vehicles, we've got kind of 20 odd years, some of them. But now we're kind of getting into the newer vehicles, which is fine. And we've kind of got our front line appliances are starting to become quite a lot newer, but we're having the same issues that the kind of the financial side of it is quite a big cost. Especially when you think that an appliance needs to be carrying 90% of its weight. So it's always going to be laden, it's always going to have the actual equipment on it. On the flip side of that, when you get to that incident, you're going to have to be pumping potentially up to 6 hours on that. So we're kind of balancing that out. The electrical side of it, does it have the range even to get there? Plus it's got to be on blue lights, so you're driving it in kind of a different capacity. But on the flip side, when you get there, you're going to have to take all the stuff off and you're going to have to start pumping, and it just can't take it at the moment. We just haven't got that solution.
We have found with our estates teams, we found that we have a couple of Lutons and then transporters and the Varo sizes. With the payload, whenever we've used electric, there has been a lot of pushback from the staff with the fact that they don't cover the distance and they cover the load. As it's not our departments, we can't manage them to get them to use it. There's just a blank and they won't use them, even though we know they're working. We've got a problem coming up where we have to use refrigerated vans going forward because of the hot weather through the summer, and it's becoming more and more of a problem each year. We're investigating the electric vans, but we are struggling with the refrigeration.